Let's talk a little bit about tendon pain and kind of the cycle around what happens when you start to get tendon pain, and then it gets worse, and then you're not lifting and you're avoiding various exercises and things just don't get better. Now, this is not medical advice. Obviously, go see a physio or whatever they call them in America, athletic trainers, I think, or I guess PTs, same thing. But regardless, this idea around tendons, and I guess a lot of the poor advice that gets given around when you have tendon pain. Now, if you're a lifter, you probably do suffer from something within elbows or knees. I know my knees have definitely been shot, and I guess within the past couple of years, but I've actually had them come right recently just by doing essentially what I'm going to tell you in this video. Again, it's not going to work for everyone, so it kind of depends on the tendon pain, but the idea is that tendons need load. They need load and strain to be able to essentially remodel the collagen fibers that the tendons are made up of. And to do this, to put tendons under strain, as I mentioned, it needs load, and usually slow loading. So if you're doing a lot of fast dynamic movements, think like running, jumping, plyometrics, those things tend to make tendon pain worse. You probably have experienced this anyway with those activities causing issues, whereas very slow, heavier movements are there that can help to remodel that tendon and essentially make them better over time. So things like doing back squats, leg extensions, but with slower tempos, those can help improve pain over time. Now, of course, you're not going to go from extreme tendon pain to, squatting hundreds of kilos on your first day. That's not the idea. But the goal is to be able to start loading and then progressively adding load over time. Because what happens is you get a little bit of tendon pain, and with that pain, you back away from various exercises. So for example, you stop squatting, maybe you only do a quarter of the leg volume you usually do and not as heavy. And then over time, it just gets progressively worse. And especially if you take rest. Rest is the worst thing you can do for a tendon because tendons need load to heal. So what happens is you start to take rest or do a little less, and then over time, it just becomes chronic tendon pain, and it becomes very hard to get rid of. But there are some strategies that can help you with tendon pain, and ones that I've used, ones that are used well in the research. The first one would be isometrics. So doing long duration, for example, let's just talk knees, it's probably the most common. Long duration isometric split squats. So essentially you're going to sit in the bottom position of a split squat for 1 to 5 minutes. Very brutal. You would do this at the start of your session as part of your warm-up. And then this provides what is called like a numbing effect on the tendon to help you do some more loading within the session, but you're also strengthening the quads within that. So that's one strategy you can use. Obviously, you can start to add load to that too. So I've gone as heavy as even like 80 kilos for 20-second holds. Those are really nice, and they make your knees feel really good. Another option which I've used extensively and I still use now as part of my warm-ups is using blood flow restriction. So essentially you're tying like voodoo bands or a tourniquet or some kind of blood flow restriction cuff to the top of your thighs to about a 7 out of 10 intensity, and then you're doing essentially a general warm-up plus your maybe specific first movement. So if you're squatting first, you would start doing bodyweight squats, you would get under the bar, you would do maybe 2 or 3 sets of like 5 to 10 with the bar just to get the quads pumped with that blood flow restriction. Add your first load, say 60 kgs or 135, you would do another 1 to 2 sets of like 3 to 5, take the bands off, do another set with that, and then continue working out. Works perfectly for me every time. You can give that a go. Another option is at the end of your session, you can do the same thing with blood flow restriction training, but say on the leg extension, you're going to do just a typical BFR protocol, which would be 4 sets, 20 to 30 reps on the first one. It's going to be light, 30 to 60 seconds rest, and then 15 reps, 15 reps, 15 reps, all with 30 to 60 seconds rest in between. You have a massive pump, your knees will feel great. Those are kind of, I'm not going to say short term because you're still going to strengthen the legs doing them, but the longer term is to be able to start actually squatting or doing leg movements relatively heavy and having the strain on the tendon. Now I've found personally that if I keep the loading heavier but really reduce the reps, that is what's made my knees feel great recently. So instead of going and doing heavier sets of 5 or more, I would just go up and do singles, even doubles, mostly singles, and just do a lot of those. And that's been feeling really good on my knees over time as well. So The important thing to take away from this is you need to be able to load the tendon for it to get better. Obviously, don't load it to the point where it's so painful that you can't do the movement and it gets sore the following day. That would mean you're pushing too far. But you need to start loading that tendon slowly for it to remodel, to be able to essentially become a healthy tendon again. You'll probably typically avoid doing faster movements like jumps and sprints, etc. But ideally, you're getting into these full ranges of motion, or at least partial ranges of motion initially with load, so you can start signaling to that tendon to heal. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, squatting quite a bit, don't do stuff that's just going to hurt essentially, or make it worse, or hurt it more. One option you can do, as I mentioned with blood flow restriction, is you can actually do your entire session with them on. So you just tie, I guess, less tight, and then that, for some reason, just makes it feel great when you're doing certain things. So that's just something to be aware of as well, that you can do to work around tendon pain. And then obviously, since you'll be able to load it, you'll be able to eventually start to make those changes. Now, when it comes to, say, elbows are a little tricky, I've found, just because you have less options in terms of what you can do, and it's the smaller joint. I don't know what it is, but it just becomes really hard to load it effectively without pain. So it's just ensuring that maybe you're doing, if you're doing curls and things like that, use implements like dumbbells that give you a little freer range of motion around the wrist to be able to turn that forearm, versus saying using barbells. Same thing with pull-ups. Instead of using straight bars, use rings or anything that rotates naturally. These are things that can help with your elbows over time as well. And there's probably the two most, I guess the other one's like Achilles tendon. Not as common, but again, you can do heavy isometrics with that, and heavier calf raises that can help reduce pain and start to remodel that tendon as well. But if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments and I'll answer them in the next video for you.